And Zombie Reddit, today's story is...
My sister stole my baby's name and crashed her car with her daughter inside when she discovered that it was all a trap. The revenge I waited 30 years for. My sister has always sought the spotlight. How dare I, she said, get pregnant at almost the same time as her and expect a girl too. How dare I? At first she accused me of planning it. Yes, as if my husband and I had conspired specifically for this. I stared at her and told her she was being irrational. My sister didn't like hearing that, but even her husband found my response funny. This caused my sister to direct her anger towards him, yelling at him, and even starting to physically assault him. I remember looking at my husband in complete shock. It was shocking to see how she was hitting her husband, while he just stood there, allowing it without trying to stop her. In that moment, I felt a deep compassion for my brother-in-law. He deserved much better treatment than he was receiving. I have been dealing with my sister's personality for a very long time. Seeing other people maintain harmonious relationships with their siblings causes me a mixture of bitterness and frustration because I have never had that kind of bond. You imagine that close relationship with your siblings while you grow up, thinking that they will be best friends forever. I suppose I hoped that would happen with my sister. When I was little, I really wanted to be part of her activities, following her around during the day, but my sister showed no interest in including me. I remember trying to get closer to her after years and years of mistreatment where she never showed me kindness. I think I'm getting ahead of myself, so let me start from the beginning. During my childhood, I began to notice that my sister simply didn't want to have anything to do with me. She would push me, hit me, and I even remember that she bit me once. My parents would scold her because my sister was the kind of child who always caused a fuss no matter the situation. If she didn't get what she wanted, she would make a scene. She was one of those people who threw tantrums to get what they wanted. She would come into my room, and if she saw me playing with a toy, she would demand it back immediately. Her attitude made me lose the desire to play with anything. My parents worked, so I guess they got tired of constantly scolding her. It was easier for them to tell me to share my things with her and apologize. Yes, the girl who bit me was the one I should have apologized to. Quite absurd, if you ask me. My sister should have been the one to apologize for literally sinking her teeth into me. But no, that wasn't how it worked in my house. I would apologize and let her play with my toys. Eventually, my sister would get bored of them and abandon them, and then I could use them again. But only after she decided she didn't want them anymore. I hate my sister. I know it sounds harsh, but it's the truth. I hate her with every fiber of my being. It wasn't always like that, though. When I was younger, I craved her attention. I tried my best to please her, but no matter how hard I tried, my sister seemed almost offended that I would dare to try to get on her good side. It was as if she wanted to see me humiliated. Eventually, I gave up and began to develop resentment towards her. When I was 12, my sister decided she wanted a new video game that my parents had bought for me, and they sided with her and gave it to her. That moment made me realize that my parents would never be on my side. They would always choose my sister over me because she was the more troublesome child. It was easier for them to allow her to bully me because I was the daughter who caused the least amount of trouble. I suppose I could have started to behave like her, but I didn't want to be like that either. I wasn't that kind of person, so I decided to distance myself from both my sister and my parents. And if my sister wanted something of mine, I would just let her take it. It bothered me, but I saw no alternative but to accept it. When I was old enough to have friends and visit their homes, I started leaving my belongings there or at school. If they were somewhere else, I didn't have to worry about them being taken away from me. When I was able to move into university halls, I was delighted. I didn't even bother to come home during the holidays when I could avoid it. The only reason I went back was to see my friends, and I tried to spend most of my time away from home with them. Several years have passed since I graduated from university. By then, I had already got a job, a place of my own, and an independent life, far away from my sister. She had already moved out and was living with her boyfriend. I didn't think she really loved him from the way she talked about him on the few occasions I went back home. My sister saw him as her source of income, someone who would provide her with the lifestyle she wanted, which I found rather distasteful. But I tried to stay away from her as much as possible. My parents tried to make up with me, although they still allowed my sister to get away with everything she did. I couldn't trust her or them, to be honest. Outside the family, My life was going quite well. I had good friends, a good job, and I met a wonderful man. We started out as friends at first, and then he asked me out. The only thing I avoided was introducing him to my parents or my family. I didn't want to do it for a while because I knew my sister well. He wasn't the kind of man she would be interested in, as I earned more money than he did. But I was afraid my sister would do something to provoke me. I met his family, and the experience was very positive. They liked me and accepted me without drama or complications. However, he did ask about my family and wanted to meet them, so after a year of dating, I decided to introduce them. The good thing was that my sister wasn't interested in my boyfriend enough to bother us. To her, my boyfriend was nothing special. He was someone she would despise, and although it bothered me that she saw him as inferior, at least she kept her distance. It was a relief that she didn't show much interest in him, because if she had, she might have tried to seduce him. I had complete faith in my boyfriend, but I wanted to avoid all the potential drama that my sister could cause, as she lives for those kinds of situations. Besides, my sister was much more focused on her wealthy companion. I felt sorry for the man, but I thought that if he had chosen her, maybe he wasn't such a good person after all. I was able to relax a little with my family and my boyfriend, but I still kept a certain distance. Eventually, my boyfriend and I got engaged. We got married in front of a judge and then had a party with friends. I told my family after it had happened, and they were very angry. But I knew that my sister would have turned everything into a show centered on her, and my parents would have allowed it. Shortly after my marriage, my sister also got married. She threw a big, lavish wedding to which I wasn't invited, but that was okay. I really had no interest in attending her wedding. Still, she did her best to rub it in my face. I remember receiving a letter in the post, which I thought might be an invitation because it was from her. But it was an announcement that said, "We are so excited to share our special day with our family and closest friends." All written in an overly elegant cursive script. And then, in the smallest print and with a passive-aggressive tone, it said, "This is not an invitation." I could only laugh, threw it in the trash, and got on with my life. Anyway, we each went on with our lives. We were doing quite well, enjoying the first year or so of our respective marriages. After a while, my husband and I decided we wanted to have a baby, so we started trying. Somehow, I mentioned to my parents that we were planning to have a baby. My sister found out about this and decided she was going to make sure she got pregnant before me. There was no way my husband and I could have a baby first, because that would be too much for her to bear. We both started trying, and just as we announced our pregnancies, my sister announced hers too. I couldn't believe she was the kind of person who would have a baby just to get one over on me. There was no way she was having a baby for any other reason. That's how I initially perceived it. I tried to convince myself that maybe I was being paranoid. Maybe it was just a coincidence. But then, little signs started to emerge. My mother began dropping not-so-subtle hints about how my sister wanted to get ahead of me. My father made strange comments about how competitive she had always been while we were growing up, and that now as adults, that was just the way she was. Then my sister started acting as if I had beaten her in something I wasn't even competing in. She treated the pregnancy as if it were some kind of Olympic event. We both went through our respective pregnancies, and I kept in touch with my parents, letting them know how things were going. One day, I went to visit them and my sister was there. She decided to ask me about the name I had chosen for my daughter. This was something she started to insist on. You see, I always had the intuition that this would happen. It was predictable. My sister wanted to know the name I would give my daughter. We were both going to have girls, and she wanted to make sure that hers would be better than mine. So I gave her a false name. It wasn't the name I had actually chosen. My husband and I had decided on another one. The false name was one I had considered using at some point, but then we opted for another option. I kept it in mind in case the situation arose. My sister's reaction was absolutely revealing. At first, she tried to pretend that she didn't care that much, as if she were concealing her interest. But for the rest of the visit, she kept coming back to the subject, repeatedly asking me about the name. "Are you sure about that choice? How did you come up with such a strange name? Does your husband like it? Did you consider other options?" And so on and so forth. It was one question after another. If you really didn't care, why would you be interrogating me like a detective trying to solve a case? My sister wasn't very clever. You never knew when she was going to pull one of her maneuvers and try to complicate my life. So I let her believe that I was going to use that false name. Before this, I should mention that my parents insisted that I reveal the name to them. My sister pressured them to find out, wanting to know, but she didn't ask me directly because she knew I wouldn't tell her. Giving a false name was beneficial for 2 reasons. It helped me fool my sister, but it also got my parents to stop insisting. After telling them the name, I noticed that my sister seemed overly confident. It was strange, but I later realized that she was probably planning to use that name. My husband and I discussed it. He seemed upset, but I assured him that it was okay. It was fine, because I had already accepted what kind of person my sister was. As we approached my due date, I focused more on myself, on the baby, and on my husband. But it was my sister who gave birth first. One day she went into labor, and curiously, I also went into labor a few days later. I was so focused on having my baby that I didn't even think about my sister for a single moment. It was the next day after giving birth that my sister came to visit with her baby. She introduced me to her daughter with the name I had mentioned. My sister looked at my baby and said that she had loved the name so much that she had decided to use it. Since she had had her daughter first, according to her logic, now I would have to change the name. Then my husband and I started to laugh. My sister watched us, unable to understand our reaction. I explained that I had never intended to use that name. The reason I had told her that name was because I knew she would want to take it for herself. This was my way of beating her at her own game, a game she had been playing since our childhood. My sister was furious. She handed her baby to her husband and asked him to wait in the hallway. Then she started yelling at me, causing both babies to start crying. My husband asked her to leave because she was upsetting everyone. She shouted that she would never forgive me. I laughed despite all the emotions I was experiencing at that moment. My sister is completely wrong if she thinks that everything is going to happen the way she wants it to. I told her to leave, or I would call the nurse to have her removed. She shouted at me, "I can't believe you're doing this to me." Then she left, and as expected, she started complaining to my whole family. It was clear that they would take my sister's side, even if they didn't say so explicitly. It was obvious from their behavior. Honestly, distancing myself from my family and cutting ties was something I needed to do. It was something I should have done a long time ago. They never really appreciated me. Maybe they did it in their own way, but it was always my sister who seemed to matter most to them, maybe just because they wanted to keep the peace. I was saddened by the fact that I couldn't have a relationship with them because my daughter deserved to know her grandparents. However, I knew that possibility had long since vanished. So I told my parents that I wasn't going to apologize to my sister for being upset that she couldn't win me over with our daughter's names. How could she take such a happy event and turn it into a competition? There was something really wrong with her. I always knew it, but at that moment I realized that the problem went much deeper. She needed professional help if that was her main concern. Her focus should be on spending time with her daughter and her husband. It is difficult to know how her husband is handling this whole situation. I don't know because I no longer talk to either of them. I keep them at a distance, making sure I have no contact with my own biological family. But it doesn't mean I don't have a family. I have my husband, my daughter, and my husband's parents, who are wonderful. They are the parents I never had. By keeping my biological family at a distance, I hoped that my sister would finally leave me alone. But I knew her temperament, so I knew that wouldn't happen. One day, she decided to come and damage my property and my car. I found out when I woke up the next morning. It was obvious that it had been her because I had a security camera at the door. The recording showed her laughing while she did it. What was going on in her head? She seemed like some kind of movie villain. That's how I perceived her. At that moment, I decided it was time to press charges. She might not face many consequences from the authorities, but I wanted her to taste a little of her own medicine. Once arrested, my sister was quickly bailed out. Thanks, unsurprisingly, to my parents. They wanted to make sure that their beloved princess didn't have to spend any more time in custody than necessary. Of course, they didn't care that my property had been vandalized. They didn't care that I woke up to a car scratched with insults, a broken window, and a completely destroyed mailbox. They didn't care that my husband was furious, that we had to make insurance claims, that we had to clean up the mess my sister left behind. No, their only concern was their poor abused daughter, the same one they raised to believe that she could do no wrong. But the worst part was when they tried to bribe me to drop the charges. They offered me a large sum of money, so they would pay for the damages and would even help me get a more expensive car if I would just leave my sister alone. Their audacity was almost impressive, as if money could compensate for years of blatant favoritism. As if my sister hadn't already caused enough damage in my life. As if I was going to allow her to get away with it. I refused. My parents may have wanted to continue to fool my sister into believing that her terrible behavior was justified, but I wasn't going to be an accomplice. So I told them no and to delete my number. The best way to cut off all contact is to simply do it. It was something I had wanted to do with my parents for a long time, and I don't think they expected it. They kept saying they couldn't believe it, begging me to change my mind. When that didn't work, they started yelling at me, which was ironic, considering they were always telling me to stay calm and not cause a scene. But apparently it was okay when they lost their temper. My sister lost control and tried to crash her car into my house with her daughter in the back seat. I couldn't believe she did that, and neither could her husband. The car ended up hitting the sidewalk in my mailbox without even coming close to my house. While I was in the living room, I heard the impact followed by the sound of screams and a baby crying. I looked out the window and saw my sister, completely beside herself, kicking her car and cursing as if it were the vehicle's fault. She was totally out of control. The first thing I did was call my brother-in-law. I had saved his number on speed dial just in case. He deserved to know that my sister had had an accident with his daughter, who was only a few weeks old. As soon as he found out that his daughter was in the back seat, he completely lost it. He thanked me and said he was on his way. When my brother-in-law arrived, the situation became even more intense. I went out to greet him, offering him and the baby entry to the house while we called the police again. My brother-in-law, at that moment, simply broke down emotionally. He was crying inconsolably. He had been the one who had taken the most care of the baby while my sister ignored her daughter. She confessed that she barely held her, barely fed her, hardly even looked at her, unless it was to take a photo for social media. The more she talked, the more horrified I felt because the situation was worse than I had imagined. I knew my sister would be a negligent mother, but not to this extent. This wasn't postpartum depression, it was complete detachment. The moment she couldn't use her daughter to get ahead of me, she lost all interest. It was as if she only loved her daughter to try to beat me. When I ruined her plans by lying about the name, my sister decided motherhood wasn't for her. In reality, the moment she decided motherhood wasn't for her must have been before she got pregnant. But my sister never thinks things through clearly. I would be enormously surprised if she ever reflected before acting. I'm not the kind of person who lives impulsively. I'm someone who loves to plan. I even plan time to plan things. That's how organized I am. After all this, as expected, my parents contacted me again. I quickly told them that they were wasting their time talking to me on the phone because I wasn't going to change my mind. My sister had to face the consequences of her actions. It was time for her to stop having everything resolved effortlessly. This time they couldn't post bail because the authorities were considering her previous actions. The judge didn't trust that she wouldn't continue to cause trouble, and word on the street was that my sister could face anger management classes, prison time, and even a fine. She deserved it and more. But that wasn't all. Her husband also contacted me to say that he planned to divorce my sister and apply for full custody of their daughter. He asked me if I would testify on his behalf, and I didn't hesitate to accept because he deserved to have custody of my niece. She would be much better off with him. Also, having custody of my niece would give me the opportunity to spend time with her and allow our daughters to get to know each other. It was important to have extended family in our lives. My parents were only children, so I never had any cousins. At least my daughter could get to know her cousin now that my sister was no longer around. So that's my situation with my sister. Or at least what I could summarize. It's been a difficult few years, but the last few weeks in particular have been the worst. If I had written everything down here, this story would probably be 2 or 3 times as long. My parents say that no charges should be filed against the family, but I don't see myself forgiving them or withdrawing the complaint. I've put up with enough problems with my sister over the years, ever since I was a child. I had also thought of updating this later when the situation progresses, but it's probably so long that it won't fit in a Reddit post. So I promise to come back when I have news about my sister's story. If and when you're interested, Update 1. For those of you who are worried that I have dropped the charges, I have not. In fact, my sister's legal situation is more complicated now. Destroying a mailbox is considered a federal offense, so she is far from getting away with a simple fine. My brother-in-law has been granted partial custody of their daughter because the mother is in custody until the trial. He has already started the divorce proceedings and is looking to speed it up as soon as possible. Despite having married my sister, he seems to be a much better father than she could ever be as a mother. To be honest, even a hungry lioness would be a better mother to a human baby than my sister is at the moment. But she won't even act as a mother because in addition to all the legal problems she is facing, my brother-in-law assured me that she will not see her daughter even if she is released from prison. He will request not only full custody of the child, but also a restraining order. She has no shortage of evidence, since crashing a car into a mailbox with your baby in the back seat does not exactly indicate to the judge that you are a responsible mother, quite the opposite. And as for my niece's name, my brother-in-law likes it, so he plans to keep it. We like it too, only we prefer the one we chose for our daughter. My parents still want me to do something for my sister, to give her another chance. But with so many problems she's gotten herself into, even if she withdraws the charges, she won't come out of this well. She has chosen the path of violence every step of the way. Update 2. My sister asked her lawyer to draft a message for me on her behalf, which was delivered to me. A message full of threats and insults. As a result, her lawyer was removed from the case, and his license was revoked for acting against the law. All this was happening while my brother-in-law was getting a divorce and full custody of the child. He was granted a restraining order for at least 2 years, which he will have to renew after that time, although for the moment it will not be very necessary, unless my sister escapes from prison. I think that with this I have told you everything about the trial for his attacks against me and my property, as he has been sentenced to 3.5 years in prison. My parents cried throughout the reading of the verdict. I attended the trial, but I sat on the other side of the room so as not to be close to them, who all this time tried in every possible way to get me to withdraw the lawsuit. They have even had to pay a fine for harassment, thanks to the swift intervention of my lawyer. They know they will not be able to have a relationship with my daughter, just as my brother-in-law will not allow them to see his. He has forbidden them, knowing that my parents will defend my sister despite the overwhelming evidence that she is a problematic person, and that indirectly points to them being negligent parents. Before concluding these publications, I would like to highlight a comment that I found funny and worth mentioning. It was about how my sister will now be able to defend herself in prison by biting other inmates. You have no idea how much it made me laugh, because that is a characteristic move of hers to show dominance. The irony is that her teeth won't last long in prison if she tries anything like that.